Good day, everyone. Welcome back to Math 10C. We're going to be finishing off Chapter 1 today. Unit 1, which is called Measurement, deals with Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is what we're going to get started on tomorrow. After you're done this lesson and done the practice problems from Chapter 1, Section 1.3, which is what we're dealing with today, you are due to write a Chapter 1 quiz, so the next time you're in the building, you can expect to write that. You will also be getting very shortly your Unit 1 assignment. I'll be honest with you, I just finished recording this entire lesson, and for some really silly, strange reason, I didn't save it, so I'm doing this for a second time tonight. And I'm telling you that because I have other things to do, so this is going to go fairly quickly. If you need to pause the video to think about some things, that's fine. We're converting imperial measurements today to metric and the other way around as well. To begin with, just to warm up our brains and to review a few things, we've got a number of conversions to do. And I want to point out to you that we do not have to use ratios to convert within the metric system. We don't. If you want to, you can. But for example, when I take a look at B, 400 centimeters, hopefully you will have learned by now, whether it's over the past few days or junior high math and science, that to go from centimeters to meters, you divide by 100. So in other words, we take the decimal place on 400 and move it 2 places to the left and get 4 meters. If you absolutely need to use a ratio, then you go to your formula sheet and you say, well, 1 meter is 100 centimeters. That's what it says on my formula sheet. I want to find out x meters for 400 centimeters, and you cross multiply. You get x times 100, which is 100x. So you multiply top times bottom. And then you say equals top times bottom, which is 1 times 400, which is 400. You divide both sides by 100 and you get x equals 4. I'm not going to be using ratios unless it's absolutely necessary. So I'm saying within the metric system, you should know that 1,000 meters is 1 kilometer. You should know that 4 meters, to get it to be centimeters, I'm going to move the decimal place 2 to the right, or multiply the meters by 100 to get 400. And hopefully you know that there are 1,000 millimeters in a meter. Well, you should, because it's on your formula sheet. So that means we're going to move the decimal place 3 places to the right and get 1,600. If any of these 4 are not obvious to you in that way, then you have to use a ratio. It's that simple. A few questions dealing with converting between units in the imperial system. What you want to do for E is convert 66,000 feet into miles and feet. I would say a ratio is probably what you should be looking at here, unless it's obvious to you. When you go to your formula sheet, you see that 1 mile is 5,280 feet. So let's not worry about this little thing here just yet. Let's just convert the 66,000 feet into miles. So 1 mile is 5,280 feet. X miles is 66,000. I cross multiply and I get 5,280. X equals 66,000. So I'm going to take 66,000 divided by 5,280. And I get 12.5 miles. Oh, we catch a nice break there. It's 12 miles plus half a mile. So we want to take 0.5 miles and convert it into feet. I would argue that you shouldn't need a ratio to do that. You simply need to recognize that we need to take 5280 and divide it by 2 to get half of a mile. Just rewrite that. That looks a little goofy. 0.5 miles was the extra part. So what's half of 5280? 2,640 feet, I believe. feet. So it's 12 miles and 2,640 feet. Three miles is how many feet? Well, I mean, I would just multiply this by 5280. So this is a case where you could use a ratio, but I would just do this because there's 5,280 feet per mile. So if I multiply that by 3, I'll find out how many feet that is. What is that? 15.8. My brain is collapsing here on me. 5,280 times 3, 15,840 feet. So those are some questions just to warm things up. As I said, I'm kind of crunched for time here tonight, so I'm not going to worry too much about G and H. Very briefly, since there's 12 inches in a foot, 5 feet times 12 inches gives you 60 inches for the 5 feet, plus the 10 inches, this is 70 inches. Yards to miles, I guess you would set up a ratio. If you look at your formula sheet, up in the top right corner of the screen here, you can see that 1,760 yards is 1 mile. So I'm doing these, I'm just not particularly concerned about spending a lot of time on it. Well, if we divide this by 1,760, you'll get the number of miles. If you want to set up a ratio, you certainly can, but I would just argue that 4,400 yards divided by the number of yards in a mile will give you the number of miles, 2.5 miles. Okay, let's get on to the meat of the lesson. And again, I'm cutting a few corners here. So today we're going to be looking at converting between imperial and metric. I have an activity here that we're just going to skip over and cut to the chase. In the activity, we learn that basically 1 inch is about 2.5 centimeters. The more specific value is 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters. It's also the case that 1 foot is 30.48 centimeters. 1 yard is 0.9144 meters. 1 mile is 1.609 kilometers. I want to point something out to you about the yard statement. If you ever wanted to convert feet to meters, you could just write 3 feet is 0.9144 meters because a yard is 3 feet. You could write 1 yard is 91.44 centimeters because 0.9144 meters is 91.44 centimeters. You can do a lot of these things. I could write 1 mile is 1,609 meters. If I ever wanted to convert meters to miles, well, 1.609 kilometers is 1,609 meters, so I could use that ratio. Similarly, up top here, 1 foot is 30.48 centimeters. I could write 1 foot is 0.3048 meters. The reason why I am allowed to do that just to make sure you understand, is that this many centimeters is this many meters. If you look at the statement below, the reason I'm allowed to change that to 1 mile is 1,609 meters is because this many kilometers is this many meters. I'm not necessarily going to do problems that way, but I know some of you like these shortcuts. All right, let's look at some examples now. All of this information is on your formula sheet. If you take a quick peek at your formula sheet, it is in the top. Well, no, right now it's in the bottom. It's at the top of my screen here, which is the very bottom right-hand side of your formula sheet. This is what you're given for exams. All right, let's do some examples. In your notes, it says there are 2 basic ways that it can be done. I've decided over the years, and I just have to edit this so it's gone, that I don't like the 2 different methods. I'm going to stick with the ratio method. And I'm going to tell you right now that when you convert between imperial and metric, you need a ratio. Again, I want to shave off a few minutes here. Bottom line here is you were told the speed of light in this question is 299,792,458 meters per second, and we would like to know how many miles per second it is. So the bottom line here, everybody, is we need to convert this many meters to this many miles. And when I go to my formula sheet, what I see is this statement, that 1 mile is the same as 1.609 kilometers. So what we need to do, I suppose, if we stick to the script, meaning we use this, is we have to take this 299,792,458 meters and convert it to kilometers first. And that is really easy. Really easy, because to go from meters to kilometers, you divide by 1,000. So now the problem is this. 299,792.458 kilometers per second, and we want to convert that to miles per second. So we just have to find out how many miles that many kilometers is. And, you know, if I've done my job here over the past few lessons, you're understanding that this is not about miles or kilometers or the speed of light or anything like that. It's about proportional reasoning. It's about ratios. That 1 mile is 1.609 kilometers. Therefore, X miles is 299,792.458 kilometers. And we cross multiply. So you're going to have 1.609x equals 299,792.458. And by the way, once you have this, I really am assuming something on day 4 of this course. Once you have that ratio equation set up, everybody should know how to cross multiply to find x. That shouldn't be a burden. So we grab our calculator, and we're going to take 299,792.458, and we're going to divide that by 1.609 and get approximately 186,322. 186,322 miles per second. And that's A. B, again, saving a bit of time, let me explain what's going on here. There's a newspaper report in one newspaper that says somebody swam the 400-meter race, and then in another newspaper they refer to the exact same race and they say it was a quarter mile, which is 0.25. And the question is, are the measurements equivalent? Well, I would like to convert this 0.25 miles into meters so that I can compare it. When I look at my formula sheet, what do I have for miles? I can convert miles to kilometers, and then, once you have kilometers, going from kilometers to meters is just a hop, skip, and a jump. It's no big deal. So let's do that. 1 mile is 1.609 kilometers equals 0.25 miles over x kilometers. Cross multiplying, you get x times 1, which is x, equals 1.609 times 0.25. So 1.609 times 0.25 is 0.40225 clicks. Which is 402.25 meters. You just multiply kilometers by 100. Again, just a couple of brief points here. If you need to use a ratio to convert kilometers to meters, feel free. If you don't need to use a ratio to do any of this, I don't care how you reason it out. What I care about is that you get the right number of meters. So, one newspaper reports this, or one news report reports this for the distance or the length of the race. Another one does that. Clearly they're not equivalent. They're close, but not equivalent. I would probably say the 400-meter one is the one that was the true value, because the Olympics have used the metric system for quite a few years now. I think maybe if you see a news report that refers to miles, it's probably from the States where they don't use the metric system. All right, that's number 2. Number 3, I think, is just going to be an ABCD rapid fire kind of conversion. The diameter of a coin is 0.23 inches. What is that in millimeters? So when I go to my formula sheet, I see 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters. Well, if 1 inch is 2.54 centimeters, I want to convert inches to millimeters. Why don't I just do this? 1 inch is 25.4 millimeters. And then I can just do one ratio and get my answer. Once again, I believe, I hope, that in going from here to here, it's child's play. It's simple. You multiply by 10 because there's 10 centimeters, there's 10 millimeters in a centimeter. So we set up our ratio. 1 inch is over 25.4 millimeters equals 0.23 inches over x. X times 1 will equal 0.23 times 25.4. .23 times 25.4 Jackpot, 5.842 millimeters. It says to the nearest tenth rather. So I guess we'll record 5.8 millimeters. We've got an 8.9 meter tall Ferris wheel, or radius is 8.9. We want that to be feet. What is it we know about meters and feet? Well, we know 1 foot, I'm looking here. We know 1 foot is 30.48 centimeters. Well, I'm going to do the same kind of thing I did with the previous question. We know 1 foot is 30.48 centimeters. Well, that's 0.3048 meters. And again, like taking candy from a baby, I think, or I hope, to go from centimeters to meters. So what we've done, just to make sure you understand, is we've taken this thing off of our formula sheet and we've changed to something that's not on our formula sheet that's helpful for us. So I'm going to use the blue highlighted. I go 1 foot over 0.3048 meters equals x feet over 8.9 meters. I hope that you see x is going to be 8.9 divided by 0.3048, because you're going to get 0.3048x equals 8.9. You have to divide. What's the answer to this question? 8.9 divided by 0.3048. Well, that can't be right. Where's my decimal? Try that one again. I mean, you always want to look at your answers. Don't just blindly write things down. 29.2 feet. A bicycle trail in BC is 28 miles, 275 yards long. What is that in kilometers? What I would recommend doing here is just parking this 28 miles off on the side for the time being and converting 275 yards to miles. Once we have how many miles 275 yards is, we can add it to the 28 miles and then worry about converting everything to kilometers. So how are we going to do that? Well, yards and miles, we're going to look at not the conversions part, which is imperial and metric. We're going to look a bit to the right. I believe it's to the right on your formula sheet. And up. There it is. 1,760 yards is a mile. So you can set up a ratio here, I suppose. Imperial can be a little tricky. 1 mile is 1,760 yards equals X miles over 275. When you cross multiply, you'll get 1,760 yards times X, which is 1760X, equals 275 times 1. So X will be 275 over 1760. Which is 0.15625 miles. So what is the length of the trail? The length of the trail is that 28 miles plus this many miles. And I occasionally do that. I shouldn't write M for miles, it's MI. This is miles. So we're converting 28.15625 miles to kilometers. 1.609 kilometers over 1 mile. If you have miles on the bottom, you need miles on the bottom. If you have kilometers on the top, you need kilometers on the top. So I'm going to multiply that number that we have in miles times 1.609. So I need to add my 28. This is the distance in miles times 1.609. About 45.3 kilometers. I would have to say to you at this point in time, if you start to get bored with this kind of stuff, then maybe we've done our job. Because it should be kind of obvious what's going on here. You're setting up ratios. I think we have one last one. A playing card is 88.9 millimeters tall. How many inches is that? On your formula sheet, it says 1 inch equals 2.54 centimeters, which means 1 inch is 25.4 millimeters. We're playing this trick again where we're taking a ratio on the formula sheet that we don't want and just tweaking it a bit to get a ratio that's useful. Because we're trying to convert millimeters into inches, that blue highlighted ratio is useful. So 1 inch over 25.4 millimeters equals X inches over 88.9 millimeters. That might be 3.5, we'll find out. I'm going to have to take 88.9 and divide by 25.4. Yep, 3.5 inches. And you get 3.5 inches. I really do feel a little bad in terms of me rushing through this, but like I said, you can pause the video in places if you need to, and I still think it went okay. I'm just sorry that I had to rush through a few things because I wanted to get it done. There are some practice problems from your textbook. Remember that we are now done chapter 1, which is half of this unit. So you're going to be starting in the next lesson the stuff on chapter 2, which deals with formulas. The first chapter dealt with conversions, but really what it dealt with is proportional reasoning using ratios. We used conversions to help you do that. In the next chapter, we're going to be dealing with area and volume. Not because area and volume are important, but because there's formulas involved and we need to know how to use formulas. One final note, just a reminder once again, you're done chapter 1 now, you're due for a chapter 1 quiz, and you will be getting your unit 1 assignment shortly. I hope that went well for you, and in the meantime and in between time, that's it. We will talk to you later. Take care.